From your perspective as a clinical social worker who's in this every single day, what are you seeing? Like what in from your professional perspective is going on here? I just love your overview of this situation that we find ourselves in these days.
Yeah, I mean, let's zoom out so that we can zoom in on a few things. I think that the main thing I'm worried about right now is technology replacing our attachments with people. I do think in a lot of ways technology has become a primary caregiver, primary attachment figure for a lot of kids and young people. And so we have to be clear about one thing, which is that parents are not just raising kids by themselves, they're also co parenting with the internet. And it turns out that the internet is a really lousy co parent.
Talk to me about this idea of co-parenting with the internet. Like that's a mind-blowing concept.
I think back to my experience in 2019 when I opened up this clinic called Straight Up Health in Midtown Toronto. And I was working with this distractible 9-year-old boy, and I brought him out to the waiting room to deliver him back to his mom, who was sitting there at my waiting room table, sitting there with a baby on her lap and a smartphone in her hand. And I look over and I see this young girl, probably about 2 years old, and she is bent over the table scrolling on a magazine as if it's an iPad. And this was back in 2019. This is pre pandemic stuff. And that was the first time where I realized, whoa, this technology stuff really has a hold on us and also is really creating in the formation of our key developmental milestones as young people. And so it was in that moment that I really started to pivot my work just away from working with the young boy and working with the entire family. Some key, really important things, starting with the basics, the foundational elements of relationships and attachment and child development. And then from there, I sort of, the pandemic obviously took hold, which really started to change our relationship with technology, meaning that a lot of our communication became more screen mediated. So anything in our communication, when there's a screen in between us, right? Also, we know through decades of really good research and more recent research related to the pandemic that screens just really are starting to change us at the neurochemical level, but then also at the relational level as well.
When you talk about working with that family and beginning to install some of the basics around relationships and technology and how, like, what did you do with that family, and what are the things that you think were fundamental for them that might have made a positive difference?
The first thing that I really had to focus on was not to locate the problem in one young person in a family. Kids are the thermometer for their family, they're like a temperature gauge, and we know that behavior is communication. So anytime we're seeing really big thoughts, big feelings, big behaviors, that's a clue for us to pop open the hood. It's not a clue for us to pathologize a young person, right? They're interacting with their environment. And so the first step is that assessment. So I reassessed what we're dealing with. Previously, I just sort of been focusing on the assessment of the individual, but then I took a more systems approach and looked at the ways that their family interactions were creating a lot of the reported behaviors, such as distraction. And so from there, I created a model that I call connection crash, which is prominent by the 3D: distraction, disconnection, and distress. And I think that we are seeing across the board heavy use of technology creates various levels of these 3Ds: distraction, disconnection, and distress. And the intervention point at those different levels based on how that shows up in the family system.
So distraction, distress, and disconnection. Let's walk through each of those and then we'll get into your mesh framework, which I love. Talk to me about digital distraction right now, because I just see everybody bent over their phones. I'm not 100% sure that Steve Jobs, who brought the iPhone into the world many years ago, would be super thrilled about how this has all turned out for us.
I know, I know. The thing that I come back to is that the technology is working. This is what it's designed to do. It is designed to pull us into the phone. And the cost of that is significant, right? And as you referenced my mesh framework, mental, emotional, and social health, it has consequences at all levels. And even beyond that, there's a biological consequence to that too. However, I think the most prominent one that we need to be focusing on is the social health consequences. The number of families I'm speaking with right now about the importance of reintroducing social into the lives of young people is should not be overstated. And that's because all these technologies are designed to pull us away from the things that matter most, right? That's our healthy habits and routines, that's sleep, that's relationships, that's nutrition. It's really impacting all levels of health.
What impact are you seeing on sleep right now?
I think the biggest one that I'm concerned about is that we have a whole generation of kids who, by the way, this is the first generation of kids to go through puberty with a smartphone in their hand. And we're seeing a whole generation of kids who can't go to sleep without a device, who can't fall to sleep without having some form of digital relaxation or digital full regulation, which is a way that they have become really accustomed to, whether that's through music and sleep sounds on Spotify to Netflix shows to binging TikTok at night, right? It's at a really crisis level right now where kids cannot soothe themselves and fall asleep on their own.
Do you think that's true for adults too?
It absolutely is true for adults, Greg. I think that this is in a lot of ways, I go back to again my main premise, which is that the technology works. It is doing exactly what it's designed to do, right? And it's interesting because we can actually map back to the early days of this stuff and see how it started to change. And maybe I can just give you a bit of a high level overview here. For about 2015, we started to see the mental health and social health rates really increase or decrease for significant populations. So I remember over the pandemic, we heard about this adolescent mental health crisis, but it was actually already here long before the pandemic. Around 2010 to 2015 is where those rates started to change significantly. And fascinatingly, I think this is more a correlation than causation at this time, which I'll explain in a moment. But we started to see those trends increase with the rise of technology. So Snapchat, which was introduced in 2011, Instagram in 2012, we started to see some major shifts in the ways that we were socializing. So this was the time, 2010 to 2015, when social media really started to replace social life. Beyond there, that's when it really got a bit of a notch up. And this is when companies figured out, hey, we can actually incentivize people to be here more. And so they noticed through a lot of really important research that they found out that algorithms can start to capture the attention, the sleep, the time, the energy of young people specifically. That's why they're their target audience, which sends the whole family into a frenzy and creates a lot of really disastrous levels of what I call the 3Ds: distraction, disconnection, and distress. And so I think the biggest piece here that we need to really focus on is the ways that algorithms have become a part of our life, such that it has really started to change us at the neurochemical level. Our brains are changed by this. Our relationships are changed by this. And I don't want to be that health expert that's sounding the alarm bells or creating moral panic for no reason. But this problem has long existed pre-pandemic and pre-adolescent mental health crisis. And to your earlier point, this is affecting adults too. And so if the kids can't regulate themselves, it's likely there's a root to that, right? And so as far as I'm concerned, if the adults aren't okay, then the kids just don't stand a chance.